Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly, where we discuss the latest in Israel's geopolitical developments. I'm Aaron Porras, and joining me again for discussion today are former Knesset member Dr. Einat Wilf and conservative activist and CEO of Hebrew City, Mai Golan. Today we will be focusing on a pair of draft bills that are causing major waves in the Knesset and the even greater wave of voices pouring out in response to the Me Too campaign. Now turning to our first topic, two Knesset lawmakers, David Bitan and David Amsalem, are now pushing two bills forward that have alarmed the Attorney General, police, and political opponents alike. The first, called the French law because of a similarity to a law in France, would prevent any investigation of a prime minister until he or she left office. The second would stop police from giving the Attorney General's office any investigative conclusions over whether or not to file charges. While Bitan has stated that he would stipulate the law not apply to current investigations involving the prime minister, opponents still think the drafts in their current language go too far.
I think it's a shame, and there is no place for this kind of propositions in the democratic state.
מה שיש כאן, ניסיון לעשות שימוש פורמלי בכוח הכי חזק שעומד לרשות שלטון, שהוא כוח החקיקה, מסיבות לגמרי לא ענייניות, שנועדו לעזור לראש הממשלה בדרכים שונות ומשונות. זהו שיא שמשקף אובדן רסן ואובדן בושה.
החוק הזה הוא חשוב ביותר, מכיוון ששלטון החוק זה לא רק עוצמת המשטרה והיכולת שלה לחקור חשודים. שלטון חוק זה גם זכויות הנחקרים. נוצרה סיטואציה במדינת ישראל, שברגע שאדם נחקר, במיוחד איש ציבור, מאותו רגע הוא אשם. ואם יש המלצת משטרה, אז הוא אשם עוד יותר, ובעצם המשטרה לא קובעת. מי שקובע זה היועץ המשפטי לממשלה. ולכן אנחנו יצרנו איזון שהוא חוקתי והוא שומר על שלטון החוק.
All right, now Dr. Wilf, I'm going to actually start with you because as a former Knesset member, what are your first feelings on these pieces of legislation?
So the first piece of legislation is typical in general of a lot of the efforts that have been made over the years to play around with the Israeli electoral systems. We often pick and choose from other electoral systems and saying, look, this is what they do in Norway, this is what they do in France, this is what they do in the US. And we consistently misunderstand that electoral systems are full ecosystems where you touch one thing, you don't know what exactly you're kind of sending out of balance. Now, in the French system, the president, who is the head of the executive, has a limited term, which is very important. If you have a limited term, it is fine to also legislate that during that limited term, the president will not be investigated because it's very clear that at the end of 5 years, you can begin to the investigation. We have a parliamentary system, which is the most common system in the world. In a parliamentary system, the prime minister rules as long as he has the majority of the parliament. Therefore, there is no term limit. There are no term limits in parliamentary systems. So if you introduce the idea that you cannot investigate the head of the executive, and you do that within the context of an electoral system where there are no term limits, you are creating the completely perverse incentive of the head of the executive to make sure that he does everything in his power to ensure that he is never out of power, because he knows that at the moment that he's out of power, the investigation can begin. So either you introduce the full package, term limits and that, which is not something you do in a parliamentary system, or you realize that this is not relevant for our system. And again, it's only used in this context as part of the broader psychological effort to introduce the idea that there is something deeply illegitimate about the investigation of a prime minister.
So, Mai, do you agree that this is, this bastardization, if you will, of another law that we're picking and choosing where we shouldn't be?
What I think is that we have a right-wing government and a right-wing prime minister who's been feeling prosecuted for the last couple of years, been feeling like everyone and anyone in the media and now in the police system, unfortunately, is against him. Now, whether I agree with this or not, I think that the worst problem of this is the chaos that it brings, because once the prime minister doesn't trust the police, and the members of the Knesset and the minister have to protect him, and in order to do that, they go against very basic laws, I think it causes a quite disturbed, not just in the Knesset members, but in the people of the country. So I can't protect this law because it feels a bit problematic to do this law when you have a prime minister that is being investigated. I know I should be, you know, we have to.
So I'm sorry to cut you off, but that goes back to something that I said earlier, that David Bitan, one of the co-sponsors of the bill, did say that he would try to exclude the current investigations into Prime Minister Netanyahu from this new law. So then it wouldn't really touch him anyway. Do you still have a problem with that law?
Absolutely not. If David Bitan actually does that, I think that it's very important that a prime minister will be able to perform and act and do his job for his country and for his people without feeling chased, without feeling, insecurity with every step that he takes. So if David Bitan is able to do that without it touching, you know, the current prime minister, and without this feeling that this law is just for Benjamin Netanyahu, then I think it's important to do, because I don't think that any prime minister can actually perform in a very stable, good way if he has the police over him, when he has the media attacking him, when he has, many people wanting to even, promote some lies about him just in order to take him out of, being a prime minister. And that is, whether we agree with this or not, that is the majority of the opinion that is going through the people of Israel, because they're feeling that some forces are trying to take out Benjamin Netanyahu, and not by the democratic way.
So going back again to Bitan, then reinforcing what you were saying, that this is just a way to protect Netanyahu and other future prime ministers from the court of public opinion. Would you agree with that, or is that a cop-out?
My heart goes out to our snowflake prime minister that he needs that protection. Everything that was described here, a prime minister that is being attacked by the media, a prime minister who people are trying to take down, that is literally the definition of every executive, every prime minister, every head of state in every country. That is the essence of power. The essence of politics is pretty much that as soon as you're there, everyone is trying to take you down. That the media is attacking you. Any politician who enters low-level political, I'm not saying prime minister, low-level political positions, anyone who goes now and says, I don't want to go into politics if the media is going to attack me, I will highly recommend that they would stay at home. So the notion that prime ministers, members of parliament, ministers are snowflakes that need to be protected from media attacks, from all that, is really something that shows a profound misunderstanding of what politics is all about.
No, I have to disagree. No one was saying that Benjamin Netanyahu is a snowflake, or anyone else in the government that we're currently having. But I don't think, and that is a real fact, that even if people won't agree with me, in this studio, the majority of the people of Israel think that. And it is a fact that I have not seen in my life, I'm not that old, but even in my life, I have not seen a prime minister in Israel, or even a member of the Knesset, or a politician being attacked by the media the way that our prime minister does. I think it's just too much. A prime minister, you cannot agree with him, and you can criticize him, and you can ask him hard questions. But to open every possible news show, and to open every possible, intellectual show in the media by starting to attack the prime minister, his wife, his family, every little thing about him, it's just too much. And it's not just me that thinks like that. It's not just the prime minister. There's a fact.
So,
one second. I just want to say one sentence. You see you see with the Trump era, ever since Donald Trump was elected, you feel a new era coming to us, and the new era is the death of politically correctness.
At the same time, though, I feel like we hear that of every politician who comes up. That with Trump, we heard that he was the most denigrated person in power ever, and with Obama, it was the same thing.
Yeah, but the people of this country, and in a very similar way, the people of the U.S. are fed up with the lies, are fed up with the incitement against the prime minister, against political activists. And yeah, it's just impossible to tolerate. So this is the reaction that you see from the members of the Knesset who are trying to protect, just remember, trying to protect the prime minister that was voted in a democratic way, although everyone seems to make him out to be like some sort of a dictator.
So Dr. Wilf, we have about a minute to respond, and then we'll move on to our next topic.
I'm thoroughly enjoying that this is not about the prime minister, but they're trying to protect the prime minister. This is precisely how all of this works. We're promoting laws that have nothing to do with our beloved, dear prime minister. Oh, but this is really to protect the prime minister. This prime minister needs no protection. He is very capable of protecting himself. The media everywhere in the world has become more vicious. This is something we need to discuss. This is not something we can legislate against. And the notion, someone said it beautifully, I very much also want to be sure that prime ministers will not be investigated. Let's do it by prime ministers not doing things for which they will be investigated. A novel idea.
All right, well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have on that topic. So moving on now to the #MeToo campaign, which has inspired millions of women worldwide to come forward with their own stories of sexual harassment. The campaign got its start following the breaking of the Harvey Weinstein scandal in October 2017, when dozens of celebrities spoke out about Weinstein's alleged sexual misconduct. The story then traveled back to the shores of Israel when it was found out that Weinstein had hired former Israeli spies to cover up his actions.
בנושא הזה אני חושב שהעבודה נלקחה בצורה מוצדקת. כשהתגלה שיש בעיה, עצרו. סך הכל קרתה תקלה. לאנשים נגרם עוול. ודאי שאנחנו מתנצלים לכל מי שנפגע מהדבר הזה. מה זה מתנצלים? אתה נפגעת ואני נפגעתי בדיוק באותה מידה. ובוודאי נשים נפגעו. עכשיו, ברטרוספקט, חבל שלקחנו את העבודה הזאת. כאשר התברר שנוצרה תקלה, עצרו, חתכו, ואולי בגלל זה הם גם מתכוונים להחזיר את הכסף, את הרווחים שלהם מהפרויקט לארגוני נשים.
Now, Maya, I'm going to start this topic up with you. So the question in Israel is, are Israeli women now able to speak up when they couldn't before? And is this issue as big as it appears to be?
Just like I said last week, I'm happy and excited that we are finally living in a time where women can speak up against sexual harassment. With that, I will say that it's very, very dangerous to make everything about sexual harassment, and we need to put this fine line between what is considered just, talking between a man and a woman, and maybe sometimes giving a compliment and feeling secure and free in a in a place of work, in your home, in your environment. But then again, so many women that I know personally have tolerated not just sexual harassment, but real crimes against them from men that they were living with, in the same area, and they couldn't speak up just because they were scared to lose their job. They were scared maybe it will ruin their reputation. And you know what? Even if there is a collateral damage, which there is, I know, it's still worth it to be living in a time where men or women, by the way, can't be suffering from sexual harassment and just stay quiet with it.
All right, Dr. Wilf, sexual harassment in Israel is defined in one or more of the following 6 things: extortion or threats made for sexual returns, indecent or lewd acts, repeated proposals of a sexual nature addressed to a person who has shown the harasser that he or she is not interested, repeated sexual references made near a party who has repeatedly asked for that to stop, degrading or humiliating treatment directed at someone in relation to sex, sexuality, or sexual orientation, and the publication of a photo, film, or recordings with a focus on sexuality without that person's consent. Do you think that these laws go far enough? Are they inclusive enough of all the issues that we're seeing?
Broadly speaking, yes, and perhaps as this process develops, we'll learn of more aspects. This is an ongoing process. But ultimately, this is not about sex. This is about power. This is about a system that, despite all the progress, is still predicated on the notion that men belong in the public sphere, men belong in the workplace, and women don't. And the violence that is shown to women in a variety of ways, whether verbal or physical, is part of the process of demonstrating to women, you do not really belong here. You do not belong in the public sphere. You do not belong in the professional sphere. And this is why this is so critical. This is about dismantling this power structure that we're still in the process of doing for, by now, 150 years, a blip in the history of this structure. But I must say also personally, in the beginning, I thought, well, this is going too far. And when the idea of sexual harassment was introduced, it was very new to us. And then one day I thought to myself, actually, why is it a big issue? Why should it not be so obvious and simple that every woman could go into the public sphere, into the professional era, feel safe, feel secure, and know that she is treated for her capacities, abilities, brains.
Do you think that there is anything inherently specific or unique to Israel about this issue?
In Israel, you have various aspects. You have the religious aspect. I can tell you, for example, that I encountered it many times, religion and the notion of religious modesty, which is, again, an invention to protect males against the erosion of their power within the religious sphere, is sometimes used as a way to harass women. As a member of parliament, I found it that religious members of parliament would say things in the name of so-called being offended, which I found was deeply offensive. So these are things that might be specific to Israel, but the phenomena as a whole in that were not unique.
Maya, something to add?
You know, I want to say something. And it's going to be a hard sentence, but some people don't agree with me when I say it. But I think there wasn't one single woman that hasn't been harassed one way or the other. Because today, according to what you read, even by just walking down the street and, you know, having a man shouting something that is inappropriate to you, it's a sexual harassment. Yeah. So really, you can't find a woman that hasn't been sexual harassment that way or the other. But you know, the specific thing to Israel for me is, for some reason, this whole thing belongs to the left side of the political map, and I'll explain to you. Whenever I talk about it, and I was here last week, and I said that, remember in the end of you asked us to say something good about our day, and I said I'm very happy that we're living in an era when a woman can stand up for her rights, and I had a lot of right-wing people coming up to me and saying, oh, come on, it's a lefty thing, it's just, you know...
so you're saying the right doesn't see this as an issue?
Exactly, and it bothers me, and I wanted to mention it here, because this doesn't concern right or left. This is a humanitarian thing. And humanitarian doesn't belong to the left, and women are getting harassed for both sides, and for some reason, it's a taboo to talk about it in the right-wing society. And for me, it's very important to say that as a right-wing activist, I will be the first one to support women in their fight, as someone who's been through sexual harassment in her life, and as someone who fought it and felt that she can prove herself beyond just her face, but also with what she has to say inside. For me, it's very important that right-wing women, religious women as well, will remember that they have the right to speak up. This fight doesn't belong to anyone.
So, okay, so let's go back now into some statistics and try and see where the root of this issue, at least specifically to Israel, is caused and what we can do about it. So we see that Alex Giladi, the president of Keshet, stepped down after accusations of harassment and rape. Radio host on 103 FM here in Israel, Natan Zahavi, was also accused as well. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert is now standing accused of sexual harassment by a reporter, not former. How endemic is this issue, and where is it learned?
You know, I just want to say that regarding celebrity and famous people that are being accused, these are people that it hurts us to see that they are being accused, because they're serving as a role model for us. You know, we're talking about a prime minister and someone in the radio that we used to hear. But the reason it's so important to reveal those things about those powerful people, because it gives the courage to, you know, people from the
smaller claims.
Yeah, smaller claims, exactly, to speak up and to see if she can go out against such a strong person, so can I.
But my question is, where are we learning this in our culture? Where is this coming from?
This is coming from the agricultural era, 10,000 years, in which it was very clear. We had a system that was created where it was very clear who's powerful, who's powerless, who's at the top, who's at the bottom. This is a system that we're only beginning to dismantle in the last 150 years. Systems of power did not dismantle themselves of their own free will. So we have a system whereby the entrance of women into the public sphere, into the workforce, in human history is remarkably recent. Yeah. So this is learned in the system. Now, not all people behave in the same way. Clearly, some men take greater advantage of it. Some are more corrupted by the power. Some are more corrupted by the opportunities. But all men operate in an environment where, until recently, the repercussions, the consequences for behaving in that way were extremely low. And by and large, they lived in an environment where this was not considered a big issue
But
or
it's
a
important
problem.
to say where the courage comes from to speak up.
Well, and I'd like to touch again
The Me
on
Too
how we
campaign
address this, however.
no, but the Me Too campaign and this entire courage and this entire time when we can speak up didn't come from Israel, and we have to be honest
course
about
not.
it. It came from the
course not.
U.S. It came from what's going on
Well, I mean,
over
I
there,
think it's been around
the
since
entire
longer
world.
than the U.S. has been around.
Yeah,
so I think
yeah.
so again, I want to get at what in our culture is a continuous driving force for this type of behavior. You know, I have another statistic here. 1 in 6 women in the military here in Israel have reported sexual harassment on more than one occasion. You know, going back again, is the IDF maybe a place that is subconsciously enforcing some of these behaviors in our young men? I would like to not live in an environment where the only thing keeping men from sexually harassing somebody else is the fear of a consequence.
It will have to always be both. Society progresses by legislating, by making it clear that there are consequences. What does it mean to have norms in the society? Not everything is through legislature. It means that there are consequences of a society to behaviors that we find unacceptable. So yes, every environment today is still an environment where by and large you will find more men in power and fewer women in power. In the military, you have a situation where basically the men are getting older, right? They're getting older and they advance in the ranks, and the women stay young all the time, right? Because the women are not really part of the military structure of the hierarchy. So you have a whole organization where you have older men and younger women that never age. That in itself, when men are not used to looking at women as their equals, beyond a certain level, they no longer see women as being equals. These are the things that begin to create a mindset that they say, if someone is not my equal, then what I do to that someone who's not my equal is not as important as something that I do to someone who's my equal.
I don't think it's only about equality, because in the end of the day, you see also older women getting harassed with older men. And I think the something very basic that no one is touching when he's talking about this discussion is, you know, you put a man and a woman in the same room, and 90% of the time you'll have an attraction. Maybe not from both sides and from one side. A man is always, I don't know why you're laughing, because that
90% putting men and women, 90% of the time they'll be attracted to each other. I
didn't say to each other. I said one party will always be attracted to the other one. Usually it's men. And the problem is that men haven't learned so far how to control this. How to say, okay, if the woman is not interested in me, how do I put myself in some sort of order and decide that I am not forcing myself on her.
Because
it's not always about
imagine
equality.
that men are incapable of learning this, even throughout a young age, is to me ridiculous. I think that we can teach our generation to have respect for everybody, especially women.
Definitely our generation, but I just want to react. You know, you're talking about your generation, and obviously you consider yourself as a very modern person and you will never force yourself on someone, but think about the 2 and 3 generations before you. These are men that weren't learned that they can't sometimes, you know, even say something to a woman that harassing her, and for them to be in the same room with the woman that they're attracted to, and sometimes not even attracted to, but just want to show some machoism, some chauvinism, that's the way for them to project how men they are in their eyes. And I think the problem is that we have to educate these older generations that we have new generation, that we have new order in this world. And, you know, because she kept referring to equality, and unfortunately, it's not about that always, because I think also men that respect the brains of the woman, that see her as equal, will harass her, because you know what, sometimes, and I'm saying it in a very unfortunate way, it's stronger than them. It is. And they haven't learned how to control themselves better. I know it's...
Well, I think the biggest issue is not that men lack the tools, but rather that they haven't been taught to use them. Oh, I think that there's an issue in education, not that they
you see, you know what? You see tribes in Africa today and the way they treat women, okay? And you say no one gave them the tools to learn something new. We are in 2017 here in the U.S. and Europe learn something else.
So the tools need to be learned. I think that we can all agree on that. That the tools can be created and need to be taught. And on that note, that's all the time we have today for this edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly. Thanks again to our guests, Mai Golan and Dr. Einat Wilf, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. See you next week, and shalom from Israel.